In this chapter, we will look at the systematic review protocol and develop a research question. We'll also delve into the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we apply for our systematic review. A protocol is a document that outlines the plan for the systematic review, including all the steps that you are planning to do with the research question, inclusion and exclusion criteria, and all of sort of the methods parts of your systematic review. It is written before the review begins and should be registered so that you're not tempted to alter your procedures depending on what you find. It's good practice in all science to pre-register your research questions before you see the data, and that is also the case for systematic reviews. The preferred reporting items for systematic review and meta-analysis protocols, PRISMA-P, provides guidelines and checklists for the items that you should include in your protocol. So, a research question. Well, we've said it before, but a well-defined research question is the cornerstone of systematic reviews. Everything depends on the research question. So you should take your time to figure out what is it exactly that we want to have answered. It needs to be clear, it needs to be focused, and it needs to be answerable. With answerable, we mean it should be feasible with available resources and existing literature. And so a far too broad research question might not only be time-wise unfeasible to find all the evidence for, it might not be so interesting if you get it answered because it was too broad. It needs to be novel. Ideally, you're addressing a gap in the evidence base or the knowledge base that nobody has before. So we should really be checking for existing reviews first and see if somebody else has conducted this review before. And it needs to be relevant to the scientific community. We want to produce something that can be useful for the scientific community going forward. Formulating the research question, very commonly we use this PICO framework, PICO. You might have come across it in other courses or in other contexts. PICO stands for population. Who are the subjects? Intervention. What is being investigated? This could be either an intervention or an exposure, depending on what types of research questions you want to answer. Comparison, what is it compared against? And outcome, what is the result of interest? Using these four letters PICO helps you define a more clear and concise research question because it forces you to decide on these four things. The inclusion and exclusion criteria further sort of manipulates the research question to make it even more specific. The research question itself might still be a little bit vague, but still concise. And then the inclusion and exclusion criteria sort of define more specifically what you meant with your research question. It's very important because it bridges the gap between your intended research question and then the study selection process of the systematic review. You can reuse these PICO elements that we used before, but a little bit more detail. So for instance, when you talk about population, we might more clearly define what ages and what sex or gender, what health status, and what setting. So for instance, we could say we want to study interventions in university students. So university students is our general definition of a population. But in the inclusion and exclusion criteria, we might also be more specific and say, well, we want students that are 18 to 25, so young adult university students, really. And then also in the inclusion and exclusion criteria, we might say, well, what kind of interventions are we looking at? In the general research question, we might have said, we want to look at digital interventions. But here in the inclusion criteria, we could say, yes, but specifically, we want digital interventions that are only one session. So it's not an app or anything like that. It's just a single session intervention or other forms of definitions of what we mean specifically. It could be active ingredients or dosages or something like that. What do we want to compare against? Needs to be very much clearly specified. That could be general, that we say any comparator, or it could be a specific drug that we want to compare against, or a specific treatment. What are the outcomes? Is it mortality? Is it behavior? Is it some stress scale? Whatever needs to be defined. And are there specific study designs that we care about? So you might be tempted to say, let's just collect, or let's just look at RCTs. But there could be potential a lot of evidence in cohort studies as well. And so you need to make a decision. Fields that are further along in development, there might be enough RCTs. So you could say, no, we're just going to include RCTs. And fields that are developing might need to include a broader range of study designs. Then there are other criteria that you might want to use. Publication types, what languages are you accepting, publication dates, etc.